There were so many insights and reflections in those presentations. I just want to allow a couple of questions before we go on to the next session. So if there's anyone that has any questions to any of the presenters or reflections that they want to share, we've got 2 minutes to do that. Please. And if you can just introduce who you are and then ask your question.
Okay, Pietro, Milano Checkpoint, Italy. Mine is a question, but also some provocation. We understand, and it's very clear to all of us, that PrEP is very useful also to take away the fear, the anxiety. But in an environment with limited resources, and I mean money for the test that we have to do to start PrEP and to follow up, and also time for appointments. If we have to give a priority, it's very tough, because either we have to choose, okay, this is a man with a high risk, and so he should start PrEP very soon. And then I have a man with a very low risk, but he is very anxious. He really needs PrEP also, but for another reason. So what do we do?
Thank you. There's a challenge. I think that what we can do is take a couple of other questions, and we might not have answers for your questions now, but we'll pose them ready for hopefully the time for discussion that we have after the next session. Any other questions or comments? There was so much information there, isn't it? It takes a while to absorb. So if there's no others,
of course, you don't know who I am. That was a really rich session, and I think people are still processing it. It's really interesting to hear from people like Frick and people like Kai these sort of paradoxical reactions to the idea of PrEP, as if we ever expected anything else, you know. The gay community was never going to sort of act with one voice and go, oh yeah, that's the answer then. Some people were, other people were not. People have different ways of managing their health. Think about what you've heard. Sorry, we haven't got time for a full panel discussion. We do need to move on to the next session. I will let you two. But remember, you have the chance to bring these things to the breakout sessions tomorrow, which is where there will be a lot more room to talk about and think about how you deal with these sort of community reactions to PrEP and how we work with them. Okay, but. Greg and one other person take over from Anton's job, and then we must move on to the next session.
Just a quick comment, question about thinking, messaging, and framing. There was a lot going on in that presentation, but the concept of when the exit for PrEP is that, you know, we don't have that conversation with condoms. When is the exit to stop using condoms? You know, you use a tool when it's appropriate. So I think one of the things I'd like to see as an outcome from this conference is us pull PrEP away from this clinical, medical, special thing that sits there for only special people. We really overgild the lily and underestimate PrEP users' capacity to manage, self-manage, and manage well. So I think the burden of responsibility lies on us to progress that narrative that it sits in your bedside table with condoms and lubes and poppers. You use it when you need it, as and when. Although I would never use condoms. And then I think finally, for me, it's like there were so many other options for those people who were complex cases. So self-sourcing a generic version of TAF online is an option. Only sleeping with people who are HIV undetectable is an option. We're not having those nuanced conversations. And I think as an extension of that, I've lost my last point, that'll do.
Thank you very much. Last question, reflection.
Yes. Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm from Canada, but I'm living and studying in Norway. My question, I think, can be applied to maybe a few of the presenters and hopefully throughout the conference. But I'm curious about healthcare providers continuing to act as a barrier to PrEP, because in countries where PrEP is formally accessible, people still aren't getting it, people who are eligible and who want it and who need it. So, I mean, aside from the discrimination, stigmatization that we know that can happen in healthcare, and some of the more like logistical and practical barriers around cost and wait times. I'm wondering what other barriers are people seeing in their respective countries in terms of healthcare providers being a barrier to accessing PrEP, and that could be GPs, nurses, infectious disease specialists. Yeah, and also the debate around who should be prescribing PrEP and how that is acting as a barrier. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. We made a note of those comments, questions for the panel discussion. The frame that I am finding useful in absorbing this and being a PrEP advocate and yet struggling to get others to support PrEP is that getting that balance between opportunity versus, and I won't say risk, but versus downsides. And one of the reasons I've come to this conference is to get a better sense of confidence around opportunities versus downsides. And I'm finding that a useful frame as I'm kind of digesting a lot of these presentations.